A Roman soldier who came back from battle with serious wounds didn't simply return to peace. Survival often meant facing years of pain, difficult choices, and an uncertain future in a society that demanded strength and service above all else. Number 1. The wound itself. When a Roman soldier came out of battle with a serious wound, the struggle for survival began immediately. The army had men assigned to help carry the injured off the field, and they did what they could with the tools they had. The first goal was to stop the bleeding and keep the soldier alive long enough to reach the camp. Bandages made from linen strips were wrapped tightly, and if wine or vinegar was available, it was poured over the wound to clean it. These liquids were harsh, but they helped reduce infection in ways the Romans did not fully understand. Removing weapons stuck in the body was a painful process. Arrowheads, for example, were pulled out with forceps or small hooks, and sometimes doctors had to cut the flesh open to reach them. Cauterization was another method, burning the wound to close blood vessels and stop bleeding. It was brutal, but in many cases it saved lives. Pain relief was limited, but the Romans had some options. They used opium from poppies, crushed herbs like mandrake, or strong doses of wine to dull the pain. These treatments could calm the patient, but they were never enough to erase what the man was going through. Once the soldier was stable enough, he was taken to the valetudinarium, the Roman military hospital, where he received longer-term care. Here, doctors trimmed away damaged tissue, stitched wounds when possible, and applied salves made of honey or resin that kept the wound moist but slowed the growth of infection. Regular dressing changes were important, and the staff watched closely for signs of fever or swelling. If these symptoms grew worse, they knew the man's life was in danger. Broken bones were another challenge. If a limb was cleanly broken, doctors set it straight and tied it with wooden splints. A soldier with patience and some luck could heal enough to walk or even return to duty. But crushed joints or shattered bones often meant permanent disability. Amputation was rare, but when infection spread too far, or a limb was destroyed beyond repair, surgeons sometimes cut it off to save the rest of the body. Many soldiers did not survive the shock of this operation. The recovery process relied heavily on rest and nutrition. Patients were fed warm porridge, beans, and vegetables to build strength. Wine diluted with water was given as both a drink and a disinfectant. Doctors encouraged sleep and light exercise once the wound began to close, to prevent stiffness and keep muscles from wasting. Progress was measured in small steps, being able to hold a cup again, walk a few paces, or grip a weapon. These moments gave hope to the soldier and to his comrades. Still, the wound itself often decided the future. A leg injury might make marching impossible. A damaged shoulder could end a man's ability to hold a shield or throw a spear. Even an injury to the face, especially the loss of an eye, reduced a soldier's chances of fighting effectively in the line. Surviving the wound was not the same as returning to normal. Every scar carried a reminder, and every limitation shaped what role the man could play in the army, or whether he would even remain in it at all. Number 2. Life back in camp. After the fight, a seriously wounded soldier did not return to a quiet place. He came back to a machine that kept moving, and that machine was the Roman camp. The first stop was the valetudinarium, the army hospital laid out like a small barracks with rooms, corridors, and a yard for air and light. Orderlies cleaned him up and logged his name, unit, and injury, so the pay clerks and officers could track his status. A doctor looked him over, checked the bandages from the field, and decided what happened next. Some men were kept under watch for a day to see if fever rose. Others went straight to a bed in a ward for longer care. The hospital smelled of oil, wine, wool, and smoke from small braziers, and the rhythm was steady. Dressings were changed. Wounds were washed. Bones were checked again after swelling went down. Daily life settled into a simple routine. He slept when he could and ate soft food that was easy to digest. Porridge, beans, greens, and watered wine were common, and the idea was to keep strength without upsetting the stomach. If pain allowed, an orderly encouraged slow movement so joints would not freeze. That might mean opening and closing the hand, flexing the foot, or walking the length of the corridor with a friend's shoulder for balance. The men in the next beds shared stories and advice, which helped more than most medicines. It kept fear from taking over. Once the wound looked cleaner and the fever broke, the question turned practical. Could he still serve? The centurion and the camp doctor judged that together. If he could carry a shield and march a few miles, he stayed in the line after more rest. If he could not, the unit tried to hold him by shifting tasks. A lame man could guard the gates, watch the baggage, grind grain, mend harness, or keep inventory of rations. A soldier who lost fingers might still cut steaks, sew leather, or tend the animals. He stayed inside the social circle of the unit, ate the same rations, and drew pay, which mattered for family back home. That continuity protected morale, because every man in the ranks knew he might be next. There was also the quiet struggle no one wanted to name. The night could bring dreams of the field and the faces of friends who did not make it back. The army did not have a word for trauma, but it had habits that helped. Work filled hours. Religious rites gave shape to fear. Offerings to the gods went up at the camp shrine, and a lucky charm on a cord felt steady against the skin. Visits from comrades did more than any prayer. A joke, a cup of wine, or the promise of a place on a light-duty roster made recovery feel possible. In that mix of discipline, routine, and small kindness, life back in camp gave a wounded man the best chance to find his footing again. Number 3. Returning home. The road back from the front did not feel like a victory parade. A seriously wounded soldier left the camp with discharge papers that said he was released because of his injuries, and those papers protected him on the journey. He turned in most government gear, kept small items he had paid for, and carried whatever savings he had from pay and gifts. Way stations along the roads gave him a place to rest and clean bandages, and fellow travelers often helped with food or a ride when they saw the state of his body. The trip was slow, and every mile tested whether the wound was really healing or only quiet for the moment. At home, he met the practical side of Roman promises. Some veterans got a cash bonus or a piece of land, depending on policy and timing. Others had to petition officials and ask a patron to speak for them. A man discharged because of wounds could argue for his share even if he had not finished the full term. Results depended on local administrators and the health of the treasury. In a farming village, the injury set the limits right away. A bad leg made plowing painful. A ruined shoulder made lifting impossible. Families shifted tasks, and neighbors pitched in during harvest, but help had a price in favors owed. Some veterans rented out their land and used the rent to buy a stall in the market. A few opened a small workshop where sitting work was possible. City life offered different paths. A maimed soldier could work as a gatekeeper, store guard, or clerk if he could still write and count. He might join a collegium where Jews bought burial rights and a network that found odd jobs. Auxiliary men who earned discharge also held new citizenship, which opened markets and marriages that had been blocked during service. Respect mattered, but could fade. At first, the village praised his scars and asked for stories. Later, the crowd had its own worries, and praise did not pay for oil and grain. Many veterans learned to show their scars to speed a petition, because scars were proof when words failed. Religion helped steady the mind. A man who had seen death up close gave thanks at a local altar and promised a small gift if the gods carried him through winter. Friends from the unit visited if they lived nearby, and those evenings brought back a feeling of belonging. When luck and timing aligned, a wounded veteran settled into a modest life with steady income and a role in the community. When they did not, he drifted near the edge, surviving on odd jobs, charity from a patron, and the stubborn pride that kept him moving one day at a time. Number 4. The psychological battle. A soldier who survived his wounds still had to face the quiet war that started when the shouting stopped, and that war lived in his head and in his habits. The Romans did not name trauma the way we do, yet they recognized men who had seen too much and slept too little. Night brought dreams that felt like ambushes, and small sounds in the courtyard made the heart race as if the enemy had slipped into the street. Pain fed the mind's unrest, since a throbbing stump or a shattered shoulder woke a man before dawn and kept him there with memories he could not silence. Roman culture praised toughness and self-control, so few spoke openly, but the army had routines that made a kind of therapy by accident. Work filled the hours and gave the mind a task other than replaying the fight. A veteran on light duty counted rations, mended leather, or drilled recruits in simple steps, and the rhythm steadied him more than he would admit. Friendship inside the contubernium mattered even when the tent was gone. The same men who once shared bread and jokes now shared wine and listened without judgment, and that kept isolation from hardening into despair. Religion offered another anchor. A man lit a small lamp at a household shrine, tied a charm to his belt, or promised a modest gift if the gods carried him through winter. And those gestures turned fear into a daily ritual he could manage. Some veterans joined collegia where dues bought a funeral fund, and a circle that noticed when a member stopped showing up. Others leaned on the dignity of service, wearing a discharge certificate on a cord, or pointing to scars when an official needed proof that the story was real. There were darker paths. Cheap taverns poured wine that numbed pain for a few hours, and brawls came from men who felt safer angry than afraid. Families sometimes struggled to read the new temper of a husband or son who startled at a dropped pot, or snapped at a child who touched an old wound. Over time, the outcomes split. One man learned to live inside a smaller world with steady tasks, regular sleep, and company that kept him grounded. Another drifted from job to job and avoided crowded spaces because crowds felt like formations breaking under pressure. The difference often came down to structure, to being needed, and to the small mercies of companions who remembered that bravery did not end when the battle did. Number 5. Fate beyond the battlefield. Once a badly wounded soldier left the line for good, his future hinged on how Rome chose to value broken service, and that answer shifted with time, place, and politics. If he held a legionary discharge for medical reasons, officers recorded his case and passed it to pay clerks who calculated what portion of the promised bonus he might still receive. And in better years, the central military treasury covered a cash award that helped him start over. Auxiliary veterans carried bronze diplomas that confirmed citizenship for them, and often for their children, which opened legal doors in towns where business and marriage rules favored citizens. Settlement could mean a plot in a veteran colony, a small house lot inside a planned grid, or simply priority in a nearby town market. But a shattered leg or ruined arm changed how that opportunity worked in practice. Many men leased their acreage to a neighbor and lived on the rent, took a partnership in a workshop that needed a steady hand more than a strong back, or found a seat job as a porter, gate guard, clerk, or tallyman, where scars did not limit the day's tasks. In cities, some qualified for a grain ration if they were registered residents, and membership in a burial club gave them a safety net, since dues bought a decent funeral and a tight circle that noticed when someone slipped. A respected veteran could attach himself to a local patron, present petitions more effectively, and win minor exemptions from civic burdens that were hard to perform with a damaged body. Others returned to forts as civilian staff, drilling recruits, repairing gear, or handling accounts, because the army trusted men who knew its rules. Not every path rose upward. A lean treasury meant delayed payments, and civil strife meant broken promises, so some veterans begged, hired out as night watchmen, or drifted between seasonal jobs while using scars as proof when asking magistrates for help. The best outcomes appeared where structure met sympathy, in colonies that gathered former soldiers together, in towns that respected service enough to offer steady roles, and in households that treated a wounded man as useful kin rather than a burden.